And who better to talk to right now about all of this? I want to welcome in our guest, one of the best managers in all of baseball, current manager of the Detroit Tigers. He's a World Series champion. So let's talk to him about all of this and more. AJ Hinch. AJ, thank you so much for joining me, man.
Thanks for having me, and I love the shirt. Nice work.
That's right. I got a Miggy Triple Crown logo on it. It's pretty sick.
Yeah, hey, no doubt. So, we need a couple more hits for 3,000. He's about to get into some rare air here pretty soon.
We're close, man. We're super close. I'm excited for that. Look, and I want to talk about that later with you as well. But let's start with the postseason. We're currently in the middle of the postseason, and it just got me to thinking, and I've been thinking about it over the last few days. The job as a manager in the postseason, man, like it seems like all fun and games until you get to the postseason. It almost seems like it's two different jobs for you. It seems like you're a manager in the regular season, and then when you get to the postseason, it's just a totally different job. Is that true?
Yeah, very fair and a great assessment. And I mean, I'm living and dying with all these decisions that these guys are making. I've been there. I've done it. I miss it. I mean, any manager that's sitting at home right now wishes we were in the agony of Doc Roberts and Brian Snitker and Dusty and Alex. I mean, these guys are grinding through their games, but the game's different in season versus the playoffs. And you're seeing it play out probably pretty aggressively now with all these managers are taking their pitchers out, really, really early. And that's because once you get into trouble, like it's stress from the very minute that they get a runner on base. And all of a sudden you want to go to the bullpen a batter too early rather than a batter too late. And then once you open that door down in the bullpen, like it never shuts for the rest of the night. You're always chasing matchups. And, some people like it. Some people criticize it. We get judged by the results on whether it's successful or not. But it's a different job in season when you're trying to get through 162 versus just win tonight's game, man, and try to get to the next game with a somewhat of a lead.
Yeah, it almost seems like the job in the regular season is about load management. And then when you get to the postseason, it's like all bets are off, let's go. And I kind of wanted to talk to you about managing pitching, like you just touched on in the playoffs, because we're seeing so much of it. And, it almost seems like, obviously, we're seeing a lot of starting pitchers come in out of the pen, but we can also see it a little bit of over-managing at times and like pushing the panic button. How do you go about managing the pitching in the postseason? And I look back on some of the years where I watched you do it, and it's like it can work out so great, and then you can be so judged for it. But how far ahead do you know a game plan, and then how quickly can it all be thrown out the window? It just seems like the most stressful job of all time.
Yeah, what's that Tyson saying? Like, everybody's got a plan until you get punched in the face, and that is legitimately what managing is like. You go in with a plan, and obviously, depending on your personnel and depending on how fresh your guys are, you make determinations on that way. Sometimes you use starters, sometimes you have a really good bullpen. You gotta combine what you see with what you know, and audible off of that when something crazy happens. I'm watching it all over in these series where they're trying to get the matchup, and then the matchup doesn't work, and then the next hitter comes up, and the 3-batter rule is playing a really, really pivotal role in all this, and the bad matchup comes right around the corner. So, availability is always discussed prior to the game. We'll know what guys are going to be available, what guys aren't. The short starts that you're seeing, some of that is the result of the pandemic season, and guys are gassed this time of year, and it's different. It's hard to judge this year's managers on previous years' usage patterns or how we used our pitching back in the day. But I'm seeing a lot of early calls to the bullpen chasing matchups, and the teams that are balanced. You look at what Atlanta can do to you. You look at what Houston can do to you. What Boston can do to you, LA. I mean, these teams that are left, they are matchup free. It doesn't matter whether you bring in a righty or lefty. Freddie Freeman's going to be really good.
Right.
You bring a righty or lefty, Yordan Alvarez is going to be really good. And so as a manager, when you look across the way, you better keep one eye on what's going on and what you see out on that field, combined with all this research that you have prior, and the balance and the blend and the feel during the game is still going to win out in the end, no matter what sort of the brain trust thinks of that you need to follow a script. I'm not sure that's as possible as people want it to be.
Yeah. Speaking of pulling starters early, we saw it the other day. Max Scherzer in the series against the Giants is pulled after like 3 1/3. He's pissed about it. Dave Roberts comes out. He goes to shake his hand instead of giving him the ball. We're seeing a lot of that. We're seeing the plug pulled early. A question I have for you is, when you have a guy on the mound like a Max Scherzer who's a stud, or in this instance, my brother, do you have any instances of going out on the mound when my brother did not want to come out of the game, where you had to say something? Tell me a funny story about having to pull him out of the game.
Oh my God. Well, first off, I don't think I went to the mound with JV and I was just given the ball freely. Like, there's always a smartass remark, a one-liner on the way off the mound. Like, it's never easy. And I had Garrett on that staff, Garrett Cole and Zach Greinke and, Keuchel, McCullers. Like, we had Charlie Morton. We had great starting pitching during my time in Houston. And, JV was, I took him out one time against the Angels because Shohei Ohtani had crushed him and has continued to hit him pretty well throughout that season. And I took him out and I brought in Tony Sipp to face Ohtani. Ohtani walks, and then Andrelton Simmons was right behind him and hits a bases clearing double. So JV's runs get cashed in. Shohei scores, which is Tony Sipp's issue. JV goes from having the win to the loss. And of course, when he's going by the clubhouse, you got to walk by the manager in order to get to the door of the clubhouse. And he's like, "Hey man, I'll let you know the next time I'm ready to come out of the game." And so we go down underneath and we start yelling at one another and telling each other to shut up and just two competitors that are trying to get it right. But taking your brother out, ranks right up there with taking Garrett Cole out as the two toughest guys, because not only just their approach and their demeanor and their stature in the game, but like their stuff's usually better than what the guys are that I'm bringing in out of the bullpen. No disrespect to the relievers. Third time through doesn't factor in when you're talking about a Verlander or Cole or guys like that. So it's a long walk and it's a short conversation when you get out on the mound with the big boys.
Oh God, that's great and not surprising at all. Hey, so what do you think is the most difficult part of managing in the postseason? You've done it so many times. If you were to find one thing, because obviously we've talked about the pitching, it could be that, but if you had to pinpoint one thing, what's the most difficult part about managing in the postseason?
Well, the ramifications of every decision that you make are multiplied. So, obviously during the season, you hate to lose a game because you did or didn't do something. In the playoffs, it's tenfold. So, but the biggest issue that you have as a manager is you can make a good decision and have it not work out. Every decision that doesn't work out doesn't make it a bad decision as far as process goes. Results-wise, yeah, it sucks. Every time you make a move and you bring in a guy and he gives up a homer, or you intentionally walk a guy and the next guy gets a base hit. Like, those are all huge decisions along the way in trying to get to the finish line and get to 27 outs. Your process could be perfect and your decision-making could be perfect and the results don't have to follow. In the playoffs, when every win is magnified, every loss is magnified, that roller coaster trying to get a team through a wild card win or a division series, a 5-game series, or a 7-game series in the ALCS, all the way to the World Series. Like, I've been through all of them. When the decisions that you make don't work, that feeling in your stomach doesn't go away for a really long time.
Do you have a decision, and you said all these decisions are amplified, do you have a decision that you made in the playoffs that ended up working out, but in the moment you were like, oh boy, here we go. This is either going to really work or it's really going to backfire. Can you remember one specific thing that sticks in your mind?
Yeah, well, the 2017, ALDS, we're in Boston in Game 4, and it's raining, and so I was scheduled. JV was scheduled to pitch in Game 5, but I had Dallas Keuchel on full rest that was in Game 5 too. So your brother and I talked about him coming in relief, but the rain forecast was really murky, and so Charlie Morton started the game, and they had their guy starting the game, and Chris Sale went down to the bullpen halfway through. And if you're me in the other dugout, I had Alex Cora as my bench coach, and we're sitting here saying, if they're sending Sale down there, then they know the weather better than we do. They're planning on it not raining. They're not going to burn Chris Sale, who was going to be their Game 5 starter, in the middle of Game 4. So we get JV down there, and send him out there. And I remember taking Charlie Morton out and saying, we had a lead. And I turned to AC and Brent Strom, and I'm like, hey, all I know is JV won't give up a homer. And I walk out to the mound, and I get the ball from Charlie Morton, and I hand it to Justin to face Benintendi. And what does Benintendi do? He slips,
I remember this
slider,
well.
He hangs it, he gets a homer. And we go from having the lead to not having the lead. And my Game 5 starter, who is an incredible pitcher in Justin Verlander, is now spent. And we're down. Now, your brother went on to pitch a couple innings scoreless. We ended up coming back and beating Craig Kimbrell. We clinch in Fenway. Dallas Keuchel can now start the first game of the next series. So it worked out in the end because our offense, Bregman hits a homer off Sale. I think Gaddis and Carlos Beltran end up getting big hits off of Kimbrell. We end up winning the game. So that decision ended up working out. But at the moment, I'm like, a one pitch in, I'm like, man, I just blew an entire series by making one decision and jinxing him, saying he's never going to give up a homer, not to Benintendi. Boom, homer, pull side.
Oh,
Brutal.
God. I remember that game well because I saw him. I saw him warming up, but I was like, I don't know if he'll end up coming in. And then the broadcast was like, and here comes Justin Verlander. And I yelled, and here comes Justin. Oh, my God. It was crazy. And then you end up winning that game. And go ahead.
No, and I was just saying that, and it didn't work. Like, obviously, at the beginning, it's use your guys. And, I've gone through a lot of these. Like Game 7 in 2019 with Garrett Cole, not using him and pulling Greinke, and Howie Kendrick hits the foul pull Oppo, something he hadn't done the entire season. Like, these decisions that we all assume that the other decision would have worked, and that's agonizing as a manager because the decision that you made, if it doesn't work, everybody just assumes in the world that if you'd made a different decision, it would have worked out.
Oh yeah, the other decision would have
gone perfectly fine, and we have no idea how to test that. But again, these roller coaster rides, I love how the managers are staying under control, but yet I know what's going on inside their minds and in their stomachs. It's churning.
Yeah, so you talked about that Boston series where you guys clinched on the road. And then, there's been a theme with this Astros team. We just saw them win a big game in Fenway again, and they're now heading back home with the lead. What is it about this Astros team that has now been to 5 consecutive ALCSs, which is insane, by the way, that it almost seems like even dating back to 2017 and in 2019 when you went on the road and won every game in Washington. What is it about this Astros team that is so good going on the road and winning in the opposing team's ballpark?
Yeah, they're really grown up. I mean, they believe it. It started in 2015. I'll never forget this core group of players, and it included Springer and a couple other names that aren't on the team anymore. But the Altuve and Correa specifically, when they go to 2015, go to Yankee Stadium as sort of an upstart team. We weren't expected to make the playoffs that year. They hadn't been a playoff team in 10 years. We make the playoffs, go to Yankee Stadium, and we're staring at Alex Rodriguez, and we're staring at Brian McCann, and we're staring at just monsters across the way of the New York Yankees at Yankee Stadium. And we went in and jumped on them and beat them in the wild card game. And we lost that to the eventual World Series champions, the Kansas City Royals, on the road in Game 5 when Johnny Cueto dealt and the fans were going bananas in Kansas City. That really started a hunger and a thirst for being in the league. And in 16, we get eliminated the last weekend. 17, obviously the World Series run. 18 to the ALCS, get beat by the eventual champions in Boston Red Sox. 19 go to Game 7 of the World Series and just a few outs away from closing that out. But all along the way, that experience matters, and you can see it and feel it. You look at what Carlos Correa is doing. You look at what Tuve's doing, Bregman. These guys have played 60, 70 games in the playoffs now. I used to think back when Derek Jeter was having a full season of at-bats just in the postseason throughout his career. And that's what these guys are building, and that's why they're comfortable in the month of October.
Yeah, I mean, these Correa, Bregman, Gurriel, and Bregman have played more postseason games than any sport teammates in the history of baseball, which is insane. And you talked about it in 2015 when these guys were so young and at the time, building something special. This Astros team built something special from not a lot, from not much, and weren't very good. now you're with the Tigers, and it almost feels, AJ, like there's something similar going on there. You know, you take over when this team's really young and coming off of a rough year, but you're starting to see signs. Can you see similarities between that Astros from the beginning and this Tigers team?
Sure. No, I mean, that's one of the reasons you take the job. If you look at with the Tigers and where they've been, it hasn't been pretty. And the 100-loss seasons and the rebuild and the top draft picks, and some of those guys are starting to get to the big leagues now, and some are going to come, most likely early next year when you talk about Spencer Torkelson and Riley Green. And this team is probably a little bit more weighted towards the pitching prospects. I saw the high-end pitching prospects, whereas the Astros were a little bit more built around the young position players. But you're starting to see things turn the corner. The key thing that we did in Houston and that we're hopefully to do in Detroit is surround that young core with some guys that know how to win. It wasn't until Yuli Gurriel came around and his history in the international market, playing in Cuba for all those years. You go get a Michael Brantley, you go get a Justin Verlander, you go get a Garrett Cole. I mean, we made a lot of acquisitions in Houston that really supplemented that young core group, and we're going to try to do that now. The first thing that you have to do is you have to start to believe that you're a winning franchise. We had a winning record since, I think, May 8th this division season that I'm very proud of. We didn't have all winning months, and we didn't really blow a month out of the water and have that run of success, but we felt like what it felt like to be a winning team and a contending team. We had a winning record against playoff teams. We had a season series wins against a lot of really good teams. That belief that happened in Houston is starting to happen now in Detroit. And that's what excites me about the future. But we're just getting started, and we got a lot of work ahead to get to where these guys are at now.
And this is a big credit to you, but I had a few Tigers on throughout the year. One specific sticks out to me is Michael Fulmer, who I talked to him about what you have meant to this organization. And basically what he said was that we just believe we can win. Like, it's just this new belief that we're going to win games. And like you just said, it seems like that's a culture you try and build. Like, I don't care who we're putting out there, we're going to win. And this is going to be a winning culture for a long time. So credit to you, your players already feel it.
No, and that means the world to me. If you're a manager and your players are using your terminology and are using your approach and they're using your methods, I mean, that's the biggest way to compliment the manager and the coaching staff is to emulate them and believe with them. And I got a great coaching staff here, got great players. We've really built a nice little foundation, but now we got to build the house, and we got to build the ability to win our division. We know who we're looking up at. Right now it's the Chicago White Sox and the Cleveland Indians. We finished third this season. So that's the challenge ahead. And who doesn't want to play in these October games? It's incredible.
Hey, you mentioned you've laid the groundwork. You've now done that in multiple locations. How hard is it to build that groundwork? How hard is it to build that culture that you want so badly for your organization to have?
Yeah, I mean, it's a challenge just because it's all new when you get to a place. Now, I've been fortunate to go to a couple different places and have some buy-in from the very beginning. A little easier coming into Detroit and bringing listen, when I got there, first thing I did is hire a coaching staff that had some pedigree. George Lombard had won a World Series with the Dodgers. Chris Fetter had his winning ways at the University of Michigan. And Chip Hale is coming off of the World Series with the Washington Nationals. Scott Coolbaugh had coached some of the best hitters, Nelson Cruz and Manny Machado. Jose Cruz Jr., who we hired, and he's now left and gone to Rice, was a 30-30 player in the big leagues. These guys were credentialed guys that instilled a lot of belief in our players. And to me, I thought that resonated well with building that culture when the coaching staff was so cohesive and the coaching staff was all credentialed, and we had stories to tell. I mean, if you're Akil Baddoo and you're listening to George Lombard in the outfield talk about Mookie Betts, you think you're listening? Because I think you are. I think it matters to Akil Baddoo and Robbie Grossman and others that on the experience that George had with Mookie.
I know how analytical the Astros organization was and how much they bought in and paid attention and did a lot analytically. And I also, I played in the Tigers organization for 5 years and know that for a while they weren't there. And I know the head of that organization has been saying, we know we were behind analytically. We want to get there. We want to improve there. Coming from the Astros and now being with the Tigers, how has that been for you, going from one to another? And where are the Tigers analytically?
Yeah, I think the Tigers are a little undersold with where they're at analytically. I think this has been going on for a couple of years, and I think we're trying to maximize it now in the dugout and with some of our decision making. But even with Houston, I think Houston was the forefront of a lot of things. In R&D, a lot of things of some progressive ways to do things. And I know I got a lot of attention for not intentionally walking somebody until the World Series when I did to Juan Soto, 19. And there's decision making that evolves that you can tell is a little bit more analytically driven than maybe your gut feel. But the answer is somewhere in the middle. And we've found the right balance. I think in Detroit, there is some old school in us. There's also some new school in us. There, whether it's terminology or technology or the way we're going to coach. We've had a few changes over the last few years that I know excite a lot of people, that we're kind of fast forwarding our analytics department. Jay Sartori does a really good job, heading our R&D department, and is one of our assistant GMs. And the infrastructure has been here. I think the application I'm trying to use and fast forward a little bit more in our decision making, in the dugout. But you can't lose sight of how to balance it whenever you're the major league manager. It's important to find that happy medium. Sometimes I lean more on analytics. Sometimes I lean more a little bit on what I feel and what I know about our club. The answer's in the middle.
I feel like, and what you just mentioned, I was talking to my brother earlier, and actually we were talking about how I was going to talk to you today. And one thing he mentioned is like how you don't get always caught up in just the analytics. You also have this perfect balance of like the feel to it. And I think that's what's like so special, is there is a balance of analytics as well as, look, there's just a feel that you can't get analytically to the game of baseball. And I think that's a cool balance to have for sure. But you also mentioned, AJ, that the pitching staff. And I do want to talk to you about this young pitching staff, because it was fascinating watching you this year manage them, especially, you got Mize, Skubal, Manning. I mean, these guys are studs, but they're really young. And for a while, all we did was hear with the Tigers, the future's close, these pitchers are going to be good. And now they're here. They're getting that experience, which how valuable is that experience? But also, how did you manage them this year, especially the second half of the year? It seemed like Mize would go out and dominate, as he mostly did all year, but you'd pull him sometimes after the third inning. How did you manage this staff this year?
Yeah, I mean, communication's key, and I think getting the most out of them was number one. And I think one valuable attribute of a coach, and Chris Fetter has this, I think I have this, George Lombard, others on our staff, you got to be a good listener to be a good coach. And the players are going to have an opinion. The players are going to have a vote in this deal. And you have this open communication throughout the year on this is where you need to get to be successful. And here are some concrete examples on how we can help you get there. It's not a cookie cutter program. Casey Mize is different than Tarek Skubal, who's different than Matt Manning. Different skill sets, different interpersonal skills, different learning styles, different attitudes. All great guys, super tight. I think they went on vacation right after the season all together. Like, they're super tight-knit group.
That's great.
But to get the best version of them, you got to do things a little bit differently. And some of that, there were some hard lessons there. There were some times where, I had to let them get beat up a little bit in order to teach them a lesson. There were other times that I took the ball away from them and said, no, this isn't your night, and we're gonna cut it short. We wanted them to make every start that they could this season. We thought that was important. We did limit their innings, but we challenged them from the very beginning that if we get our pitching right, we have a chance to win every night in any given game against any given opponent. Yeah. And watching Casey Mize go into the seventh against the Chicago White Sox, and ultimately, taking it on the chin in the seventh inning, but that valuable experience of having the ball in your hand with the game on the line is going to matter to him when we're in these games, one of these Octobers, and we're facing somebody with the season on the line. Tarek Skubal punching out the world. I mean, this season, I think he set a Tiger rookie record for how many punch outs that he had. Matt Manning coming up, knowing he probably was there a little bit early, and having to face his first opponent was the Angels, and you had Shohei Ohtani in the middle of his incredible season, and he's leading off against Matt Manning. I think he's the first hitter that you face. Like, those experiences are invaluable. The messaging behind it is very critical. Chris Fetter, Juan Nieves, our pitching guys, deserve a lot of credit for getting them mentally focused on what game plan to use. And then for me, I took the ball out of their hand, or I left the ball in their hand based on their performance, because that matters.
AJ, have you ever seen anything like what Shohei Ohtani did this year? I know he's the first batter Matt Manning has to face as a big leaguer, and obviously yeah. I know, no, you haven't seen anything like him because nobody has. But talk a little bit about Shohei Ohtani and the year he had this year and how difficult it was managing against him.
It was impossible, first off. We caught him when we went to Anaheim. He was right number one player of the week, and we were probably responsible for that. I think he homered 3 or 4 times in a 4-game series. He pitched 6 or 7 innings, and he won player of the week. That was no-brainer that week against us. So when he came to our place, he also pitched 6 or 7, I think, or maybe 7, or I think he could have gone 9 innings. And Joe pulled him, conserving his pitch count. I think he went 8 innings against us, but also hit one up on the deck in right field past the whole stadium. So we saw close and personal what this guy can do, and I was amazed by him. I know there's a big debate on who should be the MVP. I don't know how you go against anything but Shohei Ohtani. And I love Vlad Jr., and there are probably other guys, even Marcus Semien, who had an incredible season. But Shohei did things that need to be recognized in the record books and some hardware next to it for being an elite performer in every aspect. You want to talk about stealing bases? He stole a couple bases against everybody. Talk about throwing shutouts? It's 94-99 with a devastating split. You want power? He's going to hit ball out of the stadium. The fact that nobody else can do that in the same season, I think marks him as an MVP for sure.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And you mentioned that one game in Detroit, by the way. He threw 8. But one thing I remember is that Miguel Cabrera almost got his 500th against him, flew out to the track out there in right field. What has Miguel Cabrera meant to this young team and so many young guys coming up that haven't even really been here for that long? What has Miguel Cabrera meant to the culture of this Tigers organization?
Yeah, I mean, obviously his history in this organization's been well documented, and he's gonna go into the Hall of Fame as a Tiger, and he's incredible. And I didn't really know what to expect when I got here. I've been around veteran guys, I've been around star players. I've been around guys that are going to be in the Hall of Fame, and you got to develop a relationship slowly with those players and get them to trust you and get them to understand that you have his best interest. I challenged him to play first base, upwards of 40 or 45 times, and I wanted him to do that because I felt like having him on the field mattered. It mattered to him. It mattered to our team, to the energy of our team. I wanted to keep him healthy, so I gave him days off. And he responded with one of the best attitudes you can have on a building team. I don't even want to call it a rebuilding team, but a building team trying to win. Miggy bought in, and he did everything we asked. If we had early work, he went out for early work. If we had extra hitting, he went out for extra hitting. When we had our hitters meetings and he had something to say, he participated in those. And you don't get that out of everybody in the big leagues. You don't get that kind of influence out of everybody. And I think the winning months in the winning environment and the promise of what's ahead really ignited a little youthfulness in Miggy. The 500 homer chase, he's getting close to 3,000. We celebrated with him in the Toronto clubhouse when he hit the 500th homer. To me, it was a successful season for Miggy, going wire to wire, playing more first base than he played in the last 4 or 5 years, contributing on the field a tick better than I think people expected. And his youthfulness really did, rub off on our young players.
AJ, how cool was it being in the dugout when he hit number 500? I know I grew up watching him. I grew up being in the clubhouse with him. It was an emotional day for me just seeing it happen. How cool was it being a part of it?
Yeah, it was cool because it was controversial for me, first off, because he was smoking hot in Baltimore and he hit his 499th. We had a day game the next day. So I go to the media room, the Zoom room, and I talk to the media, and I'm like, Miggy's going to play tomorrow, we're gonna keep pressing forward. We're not gonna test the baseball gods. And then I walk in, and in Baltimore, it's a small clubhouse, small training room. It's after midnight because we had a rain delay, and we played till after midnight. We have a noon or 1 o'clock game the next day, and Miggy's in the cold tub. And I'm like, I got a 38-year-old dude, Hall of Famer potential, that is in a cold tub after midnight, and I'm going to ask this guy to play. So I go up to Miggy, and I'm like, hey, man, you're not going to play tomorrow. We're gonna get this thing at home. So he sits the next day. I got everybody behind me that bought tickets that's screaming at me, telling me they want their $50 back. We want the chance of we want Miggy. We end up winning that game. We go home for a 7 or 8 game homestand, and Miggy doesn't homer. And it was the standing room only in right field. The fans are packing the house at Comerica, and he's not hitting it. So when we get to Toronto, it wasn't that I'd let my guard down, but like I wasn't thinking homer every single time that he went up there. He had only homered like once every 15 games anyway. And so it still caught me by surprise because it was an oppo homer off of Flippin Bats that off the bat, it's sure double, but that tall wall in right field, you don't know if it's going to carry. And then when it disappears behind the fence, our whole dugout erupts. So even though we knew that he was one away, the gap between 499 and 500 kind of allowed us to let our guard down a little bit so that we could all enjoy the moment emotionally and jump up and down with him. And his biggest smile on his face, happy. It was in a win. We won the game, and which matters. When you're trying to do things right. And then we had a nice little toast in the clubhouse and tipped some champagne for him for a exclusive list of 500 homers.
And there was a curtain call on the road, correct? That happened.
Yeah. Yeah, wasn't that cool? The Toronto fans were incredible. I mean, obviously, and Flippin Bats, who let us have the moment, obviously very respectful of Miggy, and nobody wanted to be that dude that gave up the homer. And that video will be shown forever now. And the crowd was erupting. Miggy comes out, tips his hat. The Canadian fans were unbelievable. Some Tiger fans that had come in town as well. We all had that moment. And by the way, it was a close game. Like I said, we won the game. And we needed that homer in order to get back into the game and come back to win. So, when you look back, the Blue Jays end up, not making the playoffs by a game or two. Oh, yeah. And maybe it was Miggy's homer that could have been the deciding factor for the playoffs for them.
AJ, but before I let you go, I have to ask you about these guys because for so long we've heard for the Tigers, the pitching is near, the pitching is close, and the pitching is here. Now we're hearing the hitting is close, the hitting is near. Yeah. These young guys, Spencer Torkelson, Riley Green, they're close, and I know they're studs. I got to talk to them at the Futures game. I watch what they do. These guys are studs. So I don't want to ask you when the timeline is, but at some point next year, I'm assuming we'll see these guys. And how excited are you to have them as part of this culture in Detroit?
Yeah, I'm excited. They were in big league camp last year, and so we got a chance to see them up close and personal, learn a little bit more about them. I love their makeup. I love their determination. They're pretty hard on themselves in their first big league camp. They wanted to have like a big impression, and they made impressions that they don't even know they made yet. They think the box score is going to give the impression, and that's not the case. But they're real players and real contributors. We need to surround them with guys where they don't have to be the dudes right out of the gate. But when you're looking at what makes a young hitter ready, part of it is the swing mechanics, and part of it is their skill set and their power and the repeatability, but a lot of it is in their stomach and their head. Like, do they have the heart and the stomach and the head to handle the pressure that comes with it? I think these guys have it, and I think they're going to thrive because I think they're going to arrive around the same time. Another young player, Ryan Kreidler, Dylan Dingler. There's some guys that are starting to come up that have played together and won in A-ball. They've played together and won in AA. They've played together and won in AAA, or AAA won their division this season. They didn't have the playoffs, but to me, I think those experiences are going to make them very comfortable when they arrive in the big leagues and they're ready to help us.
AJ, speaking of guys that want to help and want to win, look, I got my Tigers 32 jersey right here behind me. I know I was released a few years ago, but now you're in charge. If there's ever a time to get me back in the game, just know that I'm ready.
Hey, I've seen the video. I've seen the homer in the spring training game, so I know you got pop.
Yeah, that was probably the furthest home run of my career, to be honest. And one of the only Oppo ones, too. I got him pretty good. AJ, thank you so much for joining me, man. I really appreciate it. Good luck with the Tigers in the future. The future is so bright. So thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Ben. Appreciate you.
Of course. See ya.